Hello, curious minds, and welcome to this intellectual journey. Have you ever looked at the world around us with its constant changes, its contradictions, and its fleeting beauty and asked yourself, is this all there is? What if this world we perceive with our senses wasn't in fact the real world? This question is not new, and it has obsessed humanity for millennia. This radical doubt about the nature of reality is the seed from which almost all Western philosophy springs. And it was systematically planted by a man whose shadow stretches over 25 centuries of thought. His name was Aristocles, but history would know him by his nickname, Plato, a man who witnessed the chaos of war and the injustice of politics, and dedicated his life to finding a solid foundation for truth. Today, we're not going to do a superficial summary. We're going to take a deep dive. Together, we're going to deconstruct his thought brick by brick. We'll trace his ideas from their origin, the trauma that defined his mission, to the complete architecture of his system. We'll travel from the dancing shadows on a cave wall to the dazzling light of the form of the good. And we'll explore why his vision of a perfect city, the Republic, remains as fascinating as it is controversial. The big question that will guide us is this: why did Plato so deeply distrust democracy and the world we see, hear, and touch? And more importantly, what superior reality did he propose as an anchor for knowledge, morality, and justice? Fasten your intellectual seatbelts, because we're about to enter the mind of one of history's giants. This is Plato's thought. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of what we're telling. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment to let your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. To understand Plato the philosopher, we must first know Plato the man. He was born around 428 BC into one of the most aristocratic and wealthy families in Athens. His real name was Aristocles. It's said that Plato was a nickname meaning the broad-shouldered one, perhaps because of his physique or his forehead. He grew up in a time of immense turmoil, a moment that would define his worldview. Athens was the cultural epicenter of the ancient world, the cradle of democracy under Pericles. But the Athens of Plato's youth was in crisis. It was embroiled in the devastating Peloponnesian War against Sparta. Plato witnessed firsthand the instability, demagoguery, and the ease with which public opinion could be manipulated, leading the city to disastrous decisions. This distrust of the multitude was sown early. Then in his youth, he met the man who would change his life forever. An ugly, penniless, and unpretentious man who walked barefoot through the agora, asking uncomfortable questions. His name was Socrates. Socrates wrote nothing, but his method of interrogation, maieutic, or the art of giving birth to ideas, fascinated the young Plato. Socrates was a gadfly, stinging the conscience of Athens. The Socratic method was revolutionary. Socrates claimed that I only know that I know nothing. He didn't claim to teach, but rather through dialogue and dialectic, he forced his interlocutors to examine their own beliefs. He demonstrated repeatedly that what people considered knowledge was nothing more than unfounded opinion, or doxa. For Plato, this was a revelation. The search for truth required demolishing false certainties. And then, in 399 BC, catastrophe struck. The climax of Athenian chaos. The recently restored Athenian democracy tried Socrates, Plato's mentor, the wisest man in Athens according to the Oracle of Delphi. The charges were absurd: impiety and corrupting the youth. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. Socrates' execution was Plato's foundational trauma. It shattered his faith in the existing political system. How could democracy, the rule of the people, murder the most just and wise man? For Plato, this wasn't just a simple miscarriage of justice. It was the definitive proof that society was fundamentally ill. Politics based on opinion and rhetoric and not on truth was lethal. This tragedy crystallized his life's mission. Plato concluded that the problem wasn't simply who governed, but what they knew. The city-state, the polis, could only be saved if it was governed by those who truly understood what justice, truth, and goodness are. The problem wasn't just political, it was epistemological, a problem of knowledge. A stable foundation for truth had to be found. After Socrates' death, a disillusioned Plato left Athens for over a decade. He traveled extensively. It is said that he went to Egypt, marveling at its millennia-old stability, and to Italy, where he came into contact with the Pythagoreans. This influence was crucial. From the Pythagoreans, Plato absorbed the idea that the underlying reality of the universe is not material, but mathematical, and the belief in the immortality and transmigration of the soul. Around 387 BC, Plato returned to Athens, now 40 years old and with a clear vision. He bought a wooded plot of land on the outskirts of the city, a garden dedicated to the hero Academus. There he founded his school, the Academy. This was not a school like ours. It was, in essence, the first university of the Western world, a center for research and intellectual training. At the entrance of the academy, there was supposedly an inscription that read, "Let no one enter here who does not know geometry." This summarizes his project. The goal of the academy was not simply to debate, it was to train the mind to go beyond the sensible world, to use the precision of mathematics as a springboard to reach higher philosophical truths. Its ultimate goal was to train the next generation of leaders, the philosopher kings. Now let's get to the core of his system. Plato inherited a philosophical debate that seemed irresolvable. On one hand, Heraclitus had said that everything flows, panta rei. The sensible world is in constant change. You never step into the same river twice. On the other hand, Parmenides argued that change is an illusion. True being is one, eternal and unchanging. Who was right? Is the world change or permanence? Plato's genius was his answer. He said both are right, but they are talking about two different things. Plato postulates a dualistic metaphysics, meaning the existence of two distinct realities. The first is the sensible world, the world we perceive with our senses. This is Heraclitus's world, a world of change, decay, and imperfection. It is the world of physical things, of copies. But above this, there exists another realm, an intelligible world which can only be grasped by reason, not by the senses. This is Parmenides' world, a realm of permanence, eternity, and perfection. This is the truly real world. It is not made of things, but of forms, or, as we know them, ideas. And this is where we must be very precise with language. When Plato says form, in Greek eidos, he is not referring to a thought in your mind. For him, a form is an eternal archetype, the perfect and immutable mold of a thing. It is the essence of something. These forms are more real than the physical objects we see. They are the cause and model of everything that exists in our sensible world. They are true reality. Let's consider an example. In the sensible world, we see thousands of chairs. There are wooden chairs, metal chairs, ugly ones, beautiful ones, broken ones, new ones. All are different, temporary, and can be destroyed. But what makes them all chairs? Plato would say it's because they all participate in the single form of chair that exists in the intelligible world. That form is the perfect concept of chairness. It is eternal and cannot be destroyed. This applies to everything. We see a just act, a just person, a just law. All are imperfect manifestations of the form of justice. We hear a beautiful melody or see a beautiful sunset. They are beautiful only because they participate in the form of beauty. Without the forms, the sensible world would be an incomprehensible chaos. The forms are what give order and intelligibility to the world. Let's summarize their characteristics. The forms are objective. They do not depend on our minds. They are eternal. They are not born and do not die. They are immutable. They never change. They are universal. There is only one form for each category of things. And they are intelligible. They are grasped only by reason, new. In contrast, sensible things are subjective, temporal, changing, multiple, and grasped only by the senses. What is the relationship between these two worlds? Plato uses two key concepts. The first is mimesis, or imitation. The sensible world is a copy, an imperfect imitation of the world of forms, like a shadow is a copy of an object. The second is methexis, or participation. Sensible things are what they are because they participate in the essence of their corresponding form. This is the famous theory of forms. It is the backbone of all Platonism. It resolves the Heraclitus-Parmenides debate. The sensible world, Heraclitus, flows and changes. The intelligible world, Parmenides, is eternal and unchanging. Both exist. But one is the true reality and the other is just its shadow. This theory is the basis of his metaphysics, that is, his theory of what is real. Now, Plato doesn't stop there. The world of forms is not a chaos of perfect molds. It is organized. It has a hierarchical structure. It's a pyramid of reality and truth. Not all forms have the same value or importance. Understanding this hierarchy is key to understanding how we can ascend intellectually towards truth. It's a map of knowledge. At the base of this pyramid, we would find the forms of sensible things. For example, the form of tree, the form of horse, or the form of cup. They are the archetypes of the physical objects we encounter in our everyday world. They are the lowest level of intelligible reality, but already infinitely more real than any particular tree or cup. Moving up a level in the hierarchy, we find the forms of mathematical concepts. The form of equality, the form of unity, the form of triangle, the form of circle. No triangle drawn in the sand is perfect, but all imitate the form of triangle. These forms are purer, more abstract, and higher than those of physical objects. That's why geometry was so important in the academy. Even higher up, we approach the summit. Here reside the forms of ethical and aesthetic values. The form of justice, the form of beauty, the form of truth. These are the forms that mattered most to Plato. For him, an act is only just insofar as it participates in the form of justice. They are the principles that should govern human life. And at the very apex of the pyramid, above all others, is the supreme form. The form of forms, that which gives being and reality to all others. It is the form of the good. This is not simply the form of being good, it is the good itself. It is the ultimate principle of all reality, the sun of the intelligible world. The good, agathon, is Plato's most important and difficult concept. It is not God, but it fulfills a similar function. It is the final cause of everything. Just as all things in the sensible world exist thanks to the light of the sun, all forms in the intelligible world exist and are true because they participate in the good. It is the source of all existence and all intelligibility. Plato knows this is incredibly abstract. That's why in his work, The Republic, he uses one of his most famous analogies to explain it. It is the analogy of the sun. He asks his interlocutor to think about the relationship between the eye, sight, visible objects, and the sun. The eye can see and objects are visible, but they cannot interact if a third thing is missing. That third thing is, of course, the light of the sun. The sun is not sight, nor is it the object seen, but it is the cause of sight seeing and of the object being seen. Furthermore, the sun is also the cause of the existence of visible objects, giving them life and growth. The sun is the king of the visible realm, providing both vision and existence. Now, Plato says, apply this analogy to the intelligible realm. The eye is the soul or reason. The visible objects are the forms. Sight is knowledge, episteme. And the sun is the form of the good. The soul can know and the forms are knowable, but they cannot interact unless an intellectual light exists. The form of the good is that light. The good is not knowledge, nor is it truth, but it is the cause of knowledge knowing and of truth being known. And just like the sun, the good is also the cause of the existence and the essence of the other forms. It is the source of all being and all truth. To know the good is the ultimate goal of philosophy. So there we have it, Plato's metaphysics, a dual reality with a sensible world of imperfect shadows and an intelligible world of perfect eternal forms, hierarchically organized and crowned by the form of the good, the source of all reality. This is the architecture of the Platonic universe, a universe designed to find stability and truth in a world of chaos. This leads us to the next logical question. If we are creatures trapped in the sensible world, in the world of change and copies, how on earth can we come to know the intelligible world? If truth is up there, how can we, down here, access it? This is the question of Platonic epistemology, his theory of knowledge. To explain this, Plato bestows upon us the most powerful and enduring image in the entire history of philosophy, a story that has resonated for centuries. It is, of course, the allegory of the cave, also from The Republic. It is a story designed to illustrate not only his theory of knowledge, but also his vision of education and the duty of the philosopher. Plato asks us to imagine an underground dwelling, a cave. In it, there are prisoners who have lived there their entire lives since childhood. They are chained by the neck and legs in such a way that they can only look forward towards the back wall of the cave. They cannot turn their heads. Their reality is and always has been that wall. Behind the prisoners, at some distance and higher up, there is a fire. And between the fire and the prisoners, there is a path along which there is a low wall like the screen puppeteers use. Along this path pass men carrying all sorts of objects, statues of men, of animals, of wood and stone, which rise above the height of the wall. The prisoners, who have never seen anything else, believe that these shadows are the sole and true reality. If they hear the men carrying the objects speak, they would attribute the sounds to the shadows. If they played a game of guessing which shadow would pass next, the most skilled among them would be considered the wisest. This, Plato says, is our state of ignorance, the lowest level of knowledge, aikasia, imagination, where we mistake shadows for what is real. Now imagine that one of the prisoners is freed from his chains and forced to turn around. The first thing he would see would be the fire. The light would hurt his eyes, accustomed to the darkness. He would see the real objects that cast the shadows and would be confused. They would seem less real to him than the shadows he was used to. This represents the painful first step of education, moving from mere shadows to physical objects, pistis, or belief. Then this prisoner is dragged up a rough and steep ascent out of the cave and into the outside world. The sunlight is so intense that at first it is completely blinding. It is a painful, violent process. Education for Plato is not an easy entertainment. It is a periagoge, a complete turning around of the soul, which hurts. Once outside, the freed prisoner must get accustomed. First, he could only look at the shadows of the real objects in the outside world. Then, their reflections in the water. After that, he would be able to look at the objects themselves, the trees, the stars, the moon. And finally, after long training, he would be able to look directly at the sun. Upon seeing the sun, he would understand that it is the source of everything. The sun, the form of the good, is what gives life to the trees and animals, the other forms, and what allows him to see them, to know them. This man has achieved episteme, true knowledge. He has contemplated the world of forms. He has become a philosopher, but the story doesn't end here. This philosopher, now enlightened, feels compassion for his former companions in the darkness. He feels it is his duty to return to the cave. He descends back into the darkness to try to free the others, to tell them that the world they believe is real is just a theater of shadows. And here comes the tragedy. When he returns, his eyes, now accustomed to the light, cannot see well in the darkness. He appears clumsy when judging the shadows. The other prisoners laugh at him. They believe his journey to the outside has ruined him, that it has blinded him. They take him for a madman. Plato concludes grimly, if the philosopher tried to free the others and force them to ascend, wouldn't they kill him if they could? This is a direct and bitter reference to Socrates' death. The philosopher, the one who has seen the truth, is misunderstood and rejected by society, which prefers the comfort of its shadows to the painful light of truth. The allegory is a perfect summary of his system. But Plato formalizes it even further with another image, the divided line. He asks us to imagine a line cut into two unequal sections, representing the sensible world and the intelligible world. Then each of those sections is cut again in the same proportion. This gives us 4 levels of knowledge. At the lowest part, the sensible world, we have eikasia, imagination, which sees the shadows of the cave, and pistis, belief, which sees the physical objects, the statues. Both are doxa, opinion. In the upper part, the intelligible world, we have dianoia, reasoning, which uses geometry and mathematics, seeing reflections outside the cave. And at the top, noesis, understanding, the pure philosophical contemplation of the forms and the good, seeing the sun. Both are episteme, knowledge. But one piece of the puzzle remains. If we are born in the cave, how can we remember the outside world? Plato introduces anamnesis, or the theory of recollection. He argues that our soul is immortal. Before being born into this body, our soul dwelled in the world of forms and contemplated them directly. The trauma of birth made us forget everything. Therefore, learning is not acquiring new information. It is recollecting what the soul already knew. This complex vision of reality and knowledge is the foundation upon which Plato builds everything else. His metaphysics, the theory of forms, and his epistemology, the allegory of the cave, are not purely theoretical exercises. They are the necessary foundation to answer the question that truly matters to him. How should we live? What is virtue? This is his ethics. For Plato, ethics begins with psychology, that is, with his theory of the soul, psyche. The soul is the most important part of us. It is immortal, divine, and temporarily imprisoned in the body. Soma sema, a famous phrase meaning the body is a tomb. The body, with its desires and senses, is a source of distraction and corruption. It ties us to the cave. But why do we feel internal conflicts? Why do we sometimes know what is right but do the opposite? To explain this, in his dialogues The Republic and Phaedrus, Plato proposes that the soul is not simple. It is divided into 3 parts, 3 species of soul that coexist within us. This is the tripartite theory of the soul. Plato illustrates this with another of his great allegories, the allegory of the winged chariot, from the dialogue Phaedrus. The soul is like a chariot drawn by 2 horses and guided by a charioteer. The charioteer represents the rational part of the soul, logistikon. It is our reason, our ability to think, calculate, and seek truth. Its natural place is the head. The first horse is noble, of good lineage, white and docile. It represents the spirited, or thymos, part of the soul, thymoides. It is the source of honor, ambition, righteous anger, courage, and will. It wants to obey the charioteer. Its natural place is the chest. The second horse is quite the opposite. It is ugly, black, rebellious, and clumsy. It represents the appetitive or concupiscent part, epithymedikon. It is the seat of our carnal desires, our appetites, hunger, thirst, sexual desire, and love of money. It pulls the chariot towards the ground, towards the sensible world. Its place is the belly. Human life, for Plato, is this constant struggle. The charioteer, reason, must try, with the help of the good horse, spirit, to tame and direct the bad horse, appetite. The goal is for the entire chariot, the entire soul, to ascend towards the intelligible world, towards the contemplation of truth and the good, from where it originally fell. And here we find the Platonic definition of virtue, arete. Virtue is not a single thing, it is the harmony of the soul. Each part has its own specific virtue. The virtue of reason is wisdom, sophia. The virtue of spirit is courage, Andrea, and the virtue of appetite is moderation or temperance, Sophrosine. But what is justice, dikaiosne, in the individual? Justice, the supreme virtue, is the state of perfect balance of the soul. It is the harmony that results when each part of the soul fulfills its own function and does not interfere with the others. That is, when reason, aided by spirit, wisely governs the appetites. A just soul is an ordered and healthy soul. Therefore, the goal of ethical life is to achieve this inner harmony. This is only achieved through philosophy. By educating our reason, by strengthening it with knowledge of the forms and the good, we give it the tools to govern. For Plato, philosophy is literally a therapy for the soul and a practice for death, an exercise in separating the rational soul from the demands of the body. This theory of the soul is the perfect bridge to the last major area of Plato's thought, his politics. For a Greek, ethics and politics were inseparable. An individual could not be good outside of a good city-state polis. Plato firmly believed in an isomorphism, a structural correspondence between the soul, the microcosm, and the city, the macrocosm. His political masterpiece is, of course, the Republic. It is important to understand that this dialogue is not a practical political plan. It is a thought experiment, a utopia. The dialogue begins with the question, what is justice? Socrates and his friends failed to define it, so Socrates proposes a thought experiment. Let's look for justice in something larger, in a city, and then see if we can find it in the individual. Thus, they construct in words the Kallipolis, the beautiful city or ideal city. And surprise, Plato's ideal city has the same tripartite structure as the human soul. Society is divided into 3 classes or estates, based not on birth or wealth, but on the natural aptitude of each person's soul. At the base of society are the producers. These are the farmers, artisans, and merchants. In their souls, the appetitive part dominates the black horse. They are the majority of the population. Their function is to provide the material needs of the city. Their main virtue must be moderation, accepting their place and controlling their desires for wealth. At the next level are the auxiliaries or warrior guardians. They are the army and police of the city. In their souls, the spirited part dominates the white horse. They are selected for their courage and noble spirit. Their function is to defend the city from external enemies and internal threats. Their main virtue is courage, and at the top of the city are the perfect guardians or rulers. They are the elite of the elite, selected after decades of the most rigorous physical, mathematical, and philosophical education. In their souls, the rational part dominates, the charioteer. Their function is to govern the city. Their main virtue is wisdom. So what is justice in the city? Exactly the same as in the soul. Justice is the harmony that results when each class fulfills the function for which it is naturally suited, and only that function. The producers produce, the auxiliaries defend, and the rulers govern. Any interference, any producer trying to govern, is injustice and leads to chaos. And this brings us to Plato's most famous and controversial proposal. Who should govern? The answer is the logical consequence of his entire system. The ruler must be the one who has left the cave, the one who has been trained to see the world of forms, the one who has contemplated the form of the good. The ruler must be the philosopher. Thus, the idea of the philosopher king is born. Plato is unequivocal. Unless philosophers rule as kings in cities, or those who are now called kings and rulers genuinely and adequately philosophize, there will be no end to the evils of cities, nor, I think, for the human race. Only one who knows the good can create a good city. Only one who loves truth and despises material power is fit to wield it. To ensure these rulers do not become corrupt, Plato introduces the most radical measures. The guardians, both auxiliaries and rulers, are forbidden from owning private property. They will live in communal barracks, eating at common tables. They will have no gold or silver, for their souls are made of gold. This eliminates corruption and greed. Even more controversially, Plato abolishes the traditional family for the guardian class. Marriages and procreation will be controlled by the state through arranged mating festivals, a form of eugenics, to produce the best offspring. Children will be separated from their mothers at birth and raised in communal nurseries without knowing who their biological parents are. The goal is for all guardians to see themselves as a single family, loyal only to the state. Education is the key to everything. It is a rigorous state system. Men and women receive the same education, a radical idea. It begins with gymnastics and music, then mathematics, astronomy, and geometry for 10 years. Then 5 years of dialectic, philosophy. After that, 15 years of military and administrative service. Finally, at age 50, the best ascend to contemplate the good and govern. This is the Kallipolis, a totalitarian, communist, aristocratic utopia. It is not an aristocracy of blood or money, but an aristocracy of intellect. It is designed for a single purpose, stability. It is Plato's antidote to the democratic chaos that killed Socrates. It is a city where reason governs, spirit defends, and appetite obeys. It is a just city. Plato has no illusions about democracy. For him, democracy is the penultimate step towards tyranny. He defines it as the rule of the appetites, a system where total freedom, anarchy, leads the multitude to be enslaved by their desires and to choose a demagogic leader who appeals to their lowest passions, who eventually becomes a tyrant to maintain order, a critique that resonates even today. Plato's Republic is a monumental work. It is the first systematic utopia in history. Although many of its ideas seem terrifying to us today, eugenics, censorship of art, the abolition of the family, its centrality is undeniable. It forces us to ask, what is justice? Who should govern? What is the price of total stability? Plato's thought is so vast that it generated criticism almost immediately, and the most important criticism came from his own star pupil, a young man who studied at the academy for 20 years before founding his own school. His name was Aristotle. Aristotle admired Plato, but disagreed on the most fundamental point. Aristotle rejected the theory of forms. For him, reality was not in a separate, intelligible world. The essence or form of a chair does not exist in a Platonic heaven. It exists within each physical chair. Aristotle, a biologist at heart, brought the forms down from heaven and placed them in the sensible world. For him, the only reality is this one we see and touch, a union of matter and form. Aristotle also formulated a famous logical criticism known as the third man argument. He said, if to explain the similarity between two men, man 1 and man 2, you need a form of man 3 in which both participate, then what explains the similarity between man 1 and the form of man? You would need a fourth form, a third man, and so on ad infinitum. This is an infinite regress that, for Aristotle, invalidated the theory. Despite these criticisms, Plato's legacy is incalculable. His idea of an immortal soul and a transcendent realm of perfect truth and goodness was absorbed by religious thought. Plotinus, in the 3rd century AD, founded Neoplatonism, which reinterpreted the form of the good as the one, a divine source. This philosophy massively influenced St. Augustine, who fused Platonism with Christianity, shaping medieval theology. In the 20th century, however, Plato faced his fiercest critics. The philosopher Karl Popper, in his book The Open Society and Its Enemies, blamed Plato for being the philosophical father of totalitarianism. Popper argued that the Callipolis, with its rigid state control, censorship, eugenics, and rejection of democracy, was the direct ancestor of the fascist and communist regimes of the 20th century. But even his harshest critics admit his greatness. Plato was the first to systematically ask about everything. What is reality? What is knowledge? What is justice? What is love? What is the soul? What is the purpose of art? Practically all the debates that have occupied Western philosophy for 2.5 millennia are already found in Plato's dialogues. That's why the 20th century philosopher Alfred North Whitehead made his famous observation. He said that the entire European philosophical tradition consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. He didn't mean that everyone was Platonic, but that everyone had to respond to the questions he raised and in the terms he established. You either agree with Plato or you oppose him, but you cannot ignore him. Plato's thought, in the end, is a monumental system. It is a bold and radical response to the problem of chaos and injustice. It presents us with a choice. Do we live in the world of shadows, chasing ephemeral pleasures and changing opinions? Or do we undertake the painful philosophical ascent towards a realm of eternal truth, absolute justice, and an immutable good? It is the choice between the cave and the sun. Thank you for joining me on this deep intellectual journey into Plato's mind. I hope it has fascinated you and, above all, made you think. It's dense but fundamental thinking for understanding how we think today. We've covered the cave, the forms, the soul, the philosopher king, and his immense legacy. If you are passionate about philosophy and want more deep deconstructions like this, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support is what makes these essays possible. And now I ask you, which of Plato's ideas resonates most with you? And what other thinker, perhaps Aristotle, Kant, or Nietzsche, should we deconstruct next? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, curious minds.